YouTube. And as you can see, we've got 4 guests today, Jake Mills, Sarah Halpin, and Dave Downie. We'll speak to a little bit more later. But I'm delighted to say, to start the show off today, also joining us is Dave Kelly, Chair of Fans Supporting Foodbanks. Thanks for coming on, mate. How are you doing?
Really good. Still coming down off cloud 9, I think.
Well, yeah, that's it. You were confirmed earlier this week as BBC Northwest's unsung sporting hero of the year. How did you feel about that? Like I said, still absolutely buzzing.
To be honest with you, I think it was a massive honour to find out that we've been nominated. So first and foremost, a big thanks to the good people at Radio City for nominating us. And I felt quite embarrassed when they rang us and said, but in the process of nominating you for the BBC Sports Personality Unsung Sport Hero, found it very humbling, to be honest with you. But I think it's always nice when someone recognises a job you're doing. So yeah, I think I'm honoured to actually be nominated, and then to be set up by them dirty people from the BBC to talk about the nomination. And then obviously for the reporter to bend down and pick the trophy up and say, well, it's more than a nomination, you've actually won it. Game was quite a shock.
Wonderful stuff, mate. Congratulations from everyone. And if anyone's got any questions for Dave, do leave them in the comments and we'll get to them in that regard. But is it extra special, Dave, given what's gone on this year, not only in the world, but in the city in particular, because we know that Liverpool's been very harshly hit by the pandemic. We were the first major city to go into Tier 3, and it's been hard for a lot of people in the region. So for yourself to be recognised and for the organisation to be recognised in such a trying time, does that make it extra special?
Well, absolutely. And I think the thing is that I don't particularly feel that it's me who's being recognised. We've always been about a collective. It's always been about all of us, not one of us. And fortunately or unfortunately, as the case may be, myself and Ian Byrne tend to get most of the plaudits. Fans Supporting Foodbanks is about a collective. It's not about a red or a blue, and it's not about Scousers. It's about football fans. So I'd like to think that its esteemed guests tonight feel as proud as I do. This is recognition. It's almost a celebration of Scouserness, to be honest with you. We should all be pleased. Fans Supporting Foodbanks would never work without the wonderful, magnificent volunteers we've got. And I'm currently shielding myself at the moment. Does that mean that the group and the organisation actually grinds to a stop? No, not at all. Them wonderful volunteers go out and about over and above the call of duty. So I think it's more about the collaborative approach rather than any individual.
And finally, for me, because I know that the other guys have got some questions to ask you as well, what have been the logistical challenges for you with that in mind? You said there you've had to isolate. I imagine there's other people involved in this who have had to isolate as well. How have you managed to maintain that service and help so many people in the city, given what's going on?
Well, I think given when we first started, we took a conscious decision that we were never, ever going to collect money. I don't see my strength and my forte as sitting in front of a big table with loads of receipts and invoices, doing accounts. I don't want to spend 3 or 4 days a week. So we've always stayed clear of money, to be honest with you, Matt. I think when you look at the enormity of what we'd actually done, we've gone from standing outside the Winslow with a wheelie bin to an organisation. I don't like boring people with facts and figures, but we did 233 consecutive games at Anfield and Goodison. We'd gone from collecting in a wheelie bin. So when we went into the lockdown, we were collecting on average 1 ton of food, which is an amazing an amazing amount when you start accounting for all of that. Football fans and the generosity of people of the city was absolutely amazing. It blew our heads up. Believe it or not, 30% of all the food donated to the North Liverpool Food Bank was collected outside Anfield and Goodison. That's not down to me or our volunteers. That's down to the generosity of people of this city. Football community is an incredibly tight community, isn't it? And it's an incredible generous one as well. Us doing what we're doing isn't particularly the vision that most people have of who and what football supporters are. So we've gone from a scenario collecting food in the wheelie bin to we now use a 7.5 ton truck. Probably tells you how far we have come in the 5 years.
Dave, I just wanted to ask about, we see a lot of propaganda with food banks, particularly with, the government and other cities and the way politicians sort of shape it around their agenda. How does it compare to when you started? And I don't mean that in terms of the amount of what you collect now, which is incredible, but in terms of the demand for it. Have you seen a real difference in, is it worse now than when it was when you started? What's the sort of process been like with that?
I think the thing on that, Dave, is 17th of October 2015, we're standing outside the Winslow. October 2017, 2020, it's almost as if it was written in the stars. Everton played Liverpool. Now, I know it was an incredibly proud moment for all of our volunteers when both clubs came out with the teams wearing Fans Supporting Foodbanks on the training gear. What an accolade that is for a group of supporters. See the teams warming up wearing your logo on their training kit. And that was an amazing thing to happen, an absolute amazing thing to happen. Now, obviously, and I'm not sure, and you're right in what you're saying, I'm not sure we would have been celebrating our 5th anniversary. If Boris Johnson's an avid watcher of the Blue Room, I hope he raises to the challenge, because our question to him is quite simple: close us down. We shouldn't be doing what we're doing, but we're doing what we're doing because we were working class people stick together. To answer the question, over the 5-year period, the demands on the food bank had risen by 130% in that 5-year period. If you look at a smaller time scale, the demands on food banks have gone up by nearly 300% since we went into the lockdown. Now, one of the really interesting things, and most of us will be aware that we've now got a mobile food pantry, which is approaching it from a different point of view, to be honest. And the idea behind that is food banks is about creating, and it's a stick and plaster for a gaping wound. It's a stick and plaster for an emergency. The whole idea of a food bank is about 3 days emergency supply of food. The idea of the pantry is to try and challenge food insecurity head on. And the pantry signs up members, so we're currently in the process of signing up members, initially in West Derby, and obviously once the lockdown ends next week, that'll be getting rolled out to other parts of the city. The pantry is about signing up members, getting them to pay £3.50 a week, and in return, giving them £15 plus worth of food. And that is in an attempt to halt food insecurity. But when you look at what's gone on since we went into the pandemic, the food bank and the demographic of food bank users has changed beyond recognition. You've gone from a situation whereby most food bank users were probably caught in a benefits trap, or they were homeless, and it was an emergency stuff. The reality of all that is now the demographic of people now in food insecurity. You're talking about people who've probably worked all of their lives, have lived quite a comfortable life. They've got a mortgage. Many of them have got a detached house, who have either been furloughed and are only getting 80% of what they once earned. And they're now struggling to pay the mortgage, and they're having to skip meals to pay the mortgage to keep the bailiffs away from the door. So the idea about the pantry is about going into areas which the official term is a food desert, and that's predominantly areas that don't have supermarkets and wide choices of greengrocers. It's about taking food into an area with fresh fruit and veg and meat, which is of a far higher nutritional value than what the normal fare is at a food bank. I think most of the critics of food banks would question the quality and the nourishment value of food given out. And I've actually accused people in the past of being food fascists when they're talking about the foods the food banks give out. The food banks can only give out what it gets in.
Yeah.
So if we're going to Goodison or Anfield and collecting a ton of beans, unfortunately, we can only give a ton of beans out. So that's why we're trying to sign people up to become members to pay £3.50 a week. It's a non-profit making exercise, and it's about meeting it head on and trying to meet it and increase the value of the nourishment that people are getting into them.
When you're talking about the demographic changing over the years, it must have posed like difficult dilemmas for you and everybody else that is in charge of distribution, simply because you could have somebody who's been homeless for several years compared to somebody who has got a mortgage and a family, and the reason why they're utilising food banks is because they're basically on their arse end because they've had to pay bills and things like that. Have you ever found like those ethical decisions to be really difficult in terms of who you prioritise in that?
We pride ourselves on prioritising anyone who comes to the food bank or to the pantry. If you turned up at our pantry on Friday and said that you didn't have the £3.50 to become a member, I'm 100% convinced that you would still leave with what you required to get you over that crisis.
Brilliant.
It's about doing it in a humanitarian way, isn't it? It's about you often hear this. The right wing media will talk about people. Well, why won't people go and get free food? Well, I'm telling you, it takes a pair to walk into a food bank and say, I can't cope. I haven't got food to feed me or my family. I've seen. I'll tell you a little tale, but probably epitomises what I've experienced and what my experience is. I was taking part in the paper cup project where they go in the city centre feeding homeless people, and we go down with a little trolley with a bit of scout soup, whatever, a couple of hot drinks, sandwiches, gloves, socks, you name it. And a girl come running up to us, and she shouted, the girl who was the team leader on the event, and she had a big beaming smile on her face. And she said, she had this coat on. I can remember as if it was yesterday, and it was 2 years ago. And she rolled up, big beaming smile on her face, and she was talking about, oh, this coat you give me is wonderful. It's lovely and warm. I'm warm now when I'm sleeping in the shop doorway overnight. Well, just think about that.
Yeah.
And she unzipped the coat and she put her hand in the inside pocket and she pulled a £20 note out of her pocket. Said, when you give me the coat, I found this £20 on the inside pocket and went to hand the £20 back over. So Sarah said to her, that's not my £20. She said, well, it's not mine. It was in the coat you give me, so it must be yours. I said, no, if it was in that coat, it's yours, take it. And you know what she did? She gave the food back that she'd just been given and got to other homeless people. And they went to the lobster spot and the lobster pot and spent the £20 in the chippy. And that tells you, people aren't using and abusing. People are there out in need. People are there out in necessity. And that's the stark reality of what we've experienced on a daily basis. You'd often get reporters will ask you, the media tend to be obsessed with, they're always looking for this key worker from the NHS, preferably a nurse, who's used the food bank. And I said to this reporter, listen, funny enough, I could take you to the exact person that you're asking me about now, because we had a girl came in yesterday. I said, but I'm not going to, and I'll tell you for why. She's got a black eye, she's got a thick lip, and she's just left a violent domestic relationship. She's actually had to flee, her and the 2 children, who are now sofa saved, and they've got nowhere to live, and they've got no means to sustain themselves. And that's the reality. Anyone can end up in that predicament. Them people sitting and sleeping in shop doorways, there's someone's sons or daughters or cousins. The reality of it is, we're all probably only a couple of wage packets away from that actually being us. So until you've actually walked in their shoes, I don't think you should be criticising.
No, absolutely not.
Jake, as well, obviously, mate, you're involved heavily with chasing the stigma and the mental health side and help people in that regard as well. And I suppose more than ever in this tough time, that it's organisations like yourself and what Dave's doing that people lean on more than ever. Do you find that as well, mate, that people are just a little bit too proud sometimes to come forward and admit they need help?
Yeah, and that is a reality of the world that we're living in at the moment, is that we're so worried about the repercussions and the reaction of other people. But I'm sure Dave will tell you as well that as soon as somebody does ask for help, the response that they get is usually the opposite of what they think it's going to be, and that's an open arms. That's let's find a way through this. One thing I'd say to Dave is that I think everybody, all of us here, anyone watching and everybody in the country wishes, like what you said, that you weren't doing what you were doing. We all wish that you didn't have to do it, but thank God you are, because the fact that you do need to do it and that you are doing it speaks volumes. And I think, without kind of getting a little bit too romantic about Liverpool in particular, but I do think that there's something that we're seeing, particularly within the charitable sector, looking at mental health. But kind of, again, like what Dave's doing, is we get a lot of people now who are seeing the problem, are seeing the gap, are seeing the void. And instead of waiting and hoping somebody else can do something about it, they're doing it. They're doing it themselves. And particularly in this city, I think we are doers. And I think we've in the past, we've experienced how we have been left behind and how people are happy just to let us get on with it. And in many ways, we're victims of our own success, but we're people who understand the need of other people. We understand the need of the people in our communities, the people on our streets, the people who need the help the most. And I think because of that approach and because of people like Dave and all the volunteers and everyone involved, they know that if you do ask for help, you'll get it. And that's the biggest difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Sarah, you're rooted in the Goodison Park area, obviously frequent on match days. Dave and his van and Fans Supporting Foodbanks are very much a consistent part of that now, aren't they? And, to echo what Jake said there, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need this, but it's fantastic that we've got it.
Oh, it is. I mean, I walk past the Fans Supporting Foodbanks little sign on Goodison almost every day, and it's a great thing to see. And to both Jake and to Dave as well, with what you do in helping the people, not only of this city, but far further than that. Anybody who needs help can come to you guys and they can get help with mental struggles they're having, with not being able to feed their families. And Yeah, it's humbling to sit here and listen to you. Actually, I've been totally engrossed in what you're saying, and in a time that there is so much darkness, and although it's, as we say, it's a real tragedy that you're still having to do this. As Jake said, thank God you do. We're all so grateful to you, and what a great person you are. You're a credit to Everton, to the city, and we're so grateful to have you. And I think I'd love to sign up and be a volunteer and help in any way that I can. And in times that are so hard, to see and listen to you, it warms my heart, and it gives me so much, because it shows there is good out there, and although it's
You're
sad
trying
that
to embarrass me now, Sarah.
Oh no, honestly, you get me. You know me, Dave. I'm sentimental, and I've had to hold the tear. It's really humbling listening to you, and to both of you. Fantastic, and so thoroughly deserved on your recognition from the BBC Northwest Awards for Unsung Sporting Hero. Top class.
I think the other important thing as well, Sarah, and a lot of you'd be astonished about some of the heartbreaking stories that we hear. People who are absolutely desperate asking us for food, and probably something that we need to get out there and make it clear to people. Fans Supporting Foodbanks isn't a food bank, so to contact us asking us for food, it's something that we can't accommodate, because we're, if you like, we're the conduit between the fans and the donors and the food bank. So we don't actually have food. I think if you ask me kids, they might challenge me on that one, because there's always something in the boot of the car because someone's just given me stuff. But the reality of it is, and this is where it does start getting complex, there's a reason why people need and use food banks. And the reality of all that is, when people are that desperate, I got contacted only last week by a girl who was sending me screenshots of the documentation she just got out of the hospital. She'd just been discharged from hospital with COVID. So no matter what happened, she had to go home and she had to isolate, and she couldn't go out. So the message went on to talk about her and her disabled son, who are now having to self-isolate, had no access to food. Now, that was at 11:30 at night. Now, really difficult to do something at 11:30 at night. So first thing the following morning, spoke to the girl. And when someone talks about the disabled son, you think of a child, don't you? A disabled son was 28 years of age. They're stuck in a house with no means of getting out. Now, they actually had money. So food bank users can come in all shapes, sizes and circumstances. So the reality of all that is, she went on to tell me that they hadn't had any dialogue, help or assistance of anybody for 6 years.
Wow.
Now, the reality of all that is that's not her fault. That's not my fault. That's not the city council's fault either. That's because politicians took a political decision to cut funding to local authorities. Everything's being cut to the bone. I'm a little bit older than most of you, so I can actually remember when there were safety nets in place to ensure that things like that didn't happen. The reality of all that is, it's not just a case of getting one of our volunteers to go around in the van and give them food. It's actually putting a support package in place. It's about directing them and getting them in touch with the relevant people as well. So this isn't just about food. It's about mental health. It's about health in general. It's about 1,001 things. Now, the reality of all that is, if we were just making sure that people were fed, we'd still have a major problem, because you'd be coming back to us the following week looking to be fed. So it's all about feed the initial problem, however, signpost people and get people the help and assistance. And I've got to say, Liverpool City Council, Everton and Liverpool football clubs don't get the credit they deserve for what they actually do and the help and assistance and the support mechanisms that they've got in place to actually help people who are in a predicament like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can only echo what Sarah said there, but I don't want to embarrass you too much. You know, you're not that type of person. But I tell you something, mate, you're an absolute ambassador and a star for our city, and like, thank heavens, you know, you're an actual lifesaver. I know people talk about the frontline NHS workers and people like that who rightly get all the credit, but the work you do, the work Rob does, Ian, everybody associated with what you guys have done, and the challenges you must have faced over the years, what you've highlighted so far. It's just really humbling, to be honest, to be in your presence when you're talking about it, Dave. But just before you go, there's something slightly different I wanted to ask you that probably has passed you by today, and it's a certain anniversary of our beloved football club, and its attempt to move to Kirkby. And obviously that was something you were particularly involved in as well. So I was really glad when we get you on tonight to sort of get your feelings about that. Sort of, what are we, 14 years on?
No, it's only 11. It might seem 11. Like 14 years. It's only 11. To be honest with you, Dave, it's something that I'm immensely proud of. Yeah, I'm proud that I stood up and was quite vocal. And I can remember certain people talking about one man and a dog. It wasn't a one man and a dog. It was a side. It might have been a vocal minority. I would suggest that it was probably a silent majority, because I don't know many people who were in favour of the move up to Kirkby. And I think one of the sad things about all of that, and I can remember sitting there with Bill and Keith prior to this kicking off, I'm basically saying the fans don't want it. It's not fit for purpose. You will never, ever, ever manage to get that through the planning process. And that was the worrying thing, is if you could get a small group of fans who could actually say that they were attempting to ride a coach and horses through the planning legislation and that they wouldn't get away with it. And I know Keith Winers passionately believed that if they could keep it out of a public inquiry, that it would be the saviour of Everton Football Club. Well, when you look at what they were proposing for Kirkby in comparison to what they're proposing for Bramley Moor, I can tell you which stadium I'd be far happier sitting in and watching the football club. I think the sentimental part of all of that would say I would probably still be of the opinion that Goodison could be reconfigured and rebuilt to be a stadium that we're proud of. But I'm more than happy to get behind the brass band and the big banner and march down Speller Lane all the way to the Bramley Moor Dock and celebrating us playing in a stadium that I believe that's fit for purpose and that represents the wider fan base. That's a massive statement. That new stadium was once again at least attempting to live up to our motto: nothing but the best is good enough for Blues.
There you go. And that's a great way to finish, mate. And yeah, you are absolutely one of the best, Dave. A great ambassador for the city and for the football club. Congratulations on that award again, mate. Thanks very much for coming on, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon. Yeah,
thanks for having us on.
Wonderful stuff.
Lovely to see you, mate.
Do you know what's really ironic? Before you chase me, coming on a football programme, I'm not mentioning Everton or talking about Everton.
Well, there you go. But before you go, mate, what did you think of Sunday?
No comments. You know the problem. I hadn't missed a home game on an away game for 17 years, so we went into the lockdown. It's not my forte watching Everton on the telly, I've got to be honest with you. It's probably like eating a Mars bar with the wrapper on, isn't it? Brilliant. It's an alien concept, isn't it? Yeah. And to be honest with you, I'd probably get more enjoyment out of listening to it on the radio than watching it on the telly.
Man after me own heart, mate.
But I think what the lesson that's got to be learned there, not just by the football clubs, but by the Premier League and the FA, Jock Stein said it, didn't he? Football without fans is nothing. And they need to realise the value fans bring to them games, and it enables them to sell an extremely valuable global commodity to a worldwide market.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, really appreciate you coming on, mate.
Wonderful. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks very much for your time, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
There he goes, Dave Kelly, chair of Fans Supporting Foodbanks. What a fella! What an ambassador for the football club, you know.
You don't feel worthy, mate, do you? It's like when we get Jake on, said it. Like, you talk about people who represent our city, and obviously more pertinently for us on our show, represent our football club. You hear the stories, and you know Jake said both of you will have stories that make your toes curl. If people sort of really understood what is beneath the surface, or when they read newspaper headlines and social media and things like that. And what scares me about modern day things like that is the paraphernalia makes you sort of take it at face value. So when somebody criticises it, you sort of take that as face value as well. And when you think about the opposition, Jake, in terms of even funding what you do, it's a constant battle and a constant fight. And I'm pretty sure you'd say to me, even though we've made some immense improvements in regards to mental health and how open people are about it, we've barely even scratched the surface yet, and we're in 2020 now.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying that at a time where it's probably ironically worse than ever as well. And it's the same, you know, I totally agree with what you're saying there, Dave, in that there's people I know and like and respect who, because they watch certain programs or the echo chamber of the social media or follow certain newspapers, don't actually believe that food banks are needed.
Yeah.
Don't believe it. And it's only when you hear Dave talking about those stories and other people who you know, from all different kind of scenarios, talking about the actual real life reality of that actually breaks that down. And for me, I know sometimes it's hard to hear, but it's important to hear the reality of it, because that's somebody who doesn't have an agenda. That's somebody who, Dave's got agendas for other things, don't get me wrong. But, you know, that's somebody who knows it, who's telling, actually, this is what I'm seeing, I'm witnessing, and here's the reality, and we need to hear that. And you know what? I think absolute credit where it's due as well to get Dave on this to talk about it, because this is where we've got a captive audience here, hopefully, to be able to listen. And it's important to use, and in my opinion anyway, it's important to use different platforms where you wouldn't necessarily talk about those things to get those messages across to people.
Yeah, we'll continue to do so. And if you want to get involved in Fans Supporting Foodbank in any way, we'll put the link in the description on the podcast as well, so you can find out more about that. If you just want to, like I said, find out a bit more information about what Dave and Ian do at Goodison Park and Anfield, and obviously with us all going back to stadium soon, hopefully, it's more pertinent than ever. And moving on to the football side of things, that's where we'll start really. Obviously, it was sort of confirmed this week that up to 4,000 spectators could be at Goodison Park for any game beyond December the 2nd. Jake's shaking his head already at this one. You're not having it, mate, now?
Honestly, I can't see, one, how it's feasible. I can't see how. I just don't see the rush. I don't see the rush for it. I just don't really understand it. I think it's going to be arguably more soulless than having nobody in there. I think, as I said, from a feasibility point of view, financially, I can't quite get my head around it, having to pay for staff to be there for policing and stuff like that. I just wait. I like, as a season ticket holder, I am more than happy for them to say nobody's going until next season, or you know, maybe if there's finals, cup finals, maybe we can make exceptions for then. I just rather just wait until next season. I know we all want to see football again. I get that, but I don't know about anybody else, but when I'm watching a match when nobody's there, I don't feel like I'm missing being there as much as if there was some people there. Like that'll be worse.
Yeah.
That'll be a worse experience for me.
You
Watching
don't feel
that.
like you're missing out, like in that sense. Yeah.
I just don't
It's
see
all or nothing, isn't it? It's an all or nothing approach.
Well, Sarah, you've been in stage a few weeks of work you've been doing for the club with the lads and the girls. Been at Goodison watching games. You went to Wembley to watch the girls in the FA Cup final as well, of course. What have you? I mean, obviously you're focusing on your job and you're broadcasting and all that kind of thing as well. But what have you made of it being inside the empty stadiums? And do you anticipate that having 4,000 people back would make that much of a difference?
I'm with Jake on this one. I wouldn't mind seeing us wait. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's nice in the sense that we're seeing progress and it's something. But as you said, with doing the Everton Live stuff, we record in Goodison before the games. Usually I leave before the kickoff, but I stayed for the West Brom game, and it was a unique experience. I enjoyed the fact we won the game, and I saw James score and Calvert-Lewin got a hat-trick. But other than that, I felt guilty for 90 minutes. I did feel guilty. Like, how come I'm here and all the fans aren't? And also, it's just not the same. When the Blues score, it's like, where's that little pause for a second, and then everyone goes, ah, and you see the Gladys Street giving it limbs. And and with the women as well, to see an FA Cup final at Wembley with nobody there was just, Wembley is not a great venue with no fans. I'll tell you, it's just, because it's nobody's home. It's just, it's a beautiful place, obviously, but it's soulless. And although I welcome the thought of fans coming back because it's a little bit normality, I'm sure it might make a little bit of a difference for the players and stuff. I'm not really entirely sure. For me, football will be back when there's 40,000 in there, and we're all back there together. It's just strange. It's like it'll be like watching a training session or something. I don't know. And like Jake, I think we're all season ticket holders here, but I don't know if I'd be overjoyed at the thought of going at the moment.
I think for me, if I got the opportunity to go, I probably would. But it wouldn't be like.
I feel like I have to add a disclaimer just to cover my own back. Yeah. If I'm one of the 4,000, I'm going. Like,
he's kind of like that on his giving a picture back in me seat.
We'll see you at the Chelsea game celebrating Dom's goal and be like, "Oh, isn't that Jake from the Blue Room? He said he didn't want to go. I didn't even want a ticket."
Yeah, I'm going. Like, don't get me wrong.
What about you, Dave? Oh, in fact, actually, before we get onto that, speaking of celebrating goals, Sarah, you got a lot of acclaim for your celebrations for Izzy's goal in the derby, didn't you? You were losing the plot behind the goal.
Oh, do you know what it was, mate? Shani did all the sort of graft, got the assist, and the ball just broke free, and it was like, is the keeper going to get there? Is Izzy going to get there? So I'm sort of jumping, going, go on, and then I saw it was going in, and it does make me laugh because... it was when I went on Twitter back afterwards and I saw a few tweets saying, get on Sarah there behind the goal, giving it loads before it's even gone in. You got to enjoy yourself, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. What about you, Dave? Would you be up for giving it loads when James scores in a 10th full Goodison Park?
Well, and I don't know exactly what Jake means in terms of having that view, but nonetheless, maybe feeling like you're a little bit of a hypocrite because you will go if you were drawn out of the ballot. I completely understand that. I don't think I'd go. I think there's two aspects to it, isn't it? There's a unique experience there. I mean, you're talking about like once in a lifetime, once in a few lifetimes, these things that we're experiencing now. I think we look in history, our kids, their grandkids, people like that, will look back on this and think, you know what? And like I do it now, when you see record books of like FA Cup winners, league winners and things like that, and you see the gaps for the war years, there'll be a gap for certain matches and certain events in our lifetime, which I think is quite astounding, really. And it's quite hard to get your head around. In terms of going back to games, I'd just like to know what the research and data is behind why 4,000. You're talking about 4,000 if you're in Tier 1, by the way, which I don't think Liverpool will be in. The city of Liverpool will be in.
2,000, isn't it? For
2,000. Yeah, I think that's the sort of ballpark area they're looking at, with us going potentially back into Tier 2 next week, which would be great for all sorts of reasons, not least the hospitality industry. But how does that work out in a stadium the size of Old Trafford or the stadium the size of Wembley 4,000 is even more of a paltry sum than it is for us going to Goodison. So why is it not done on a percentage basis? I don't understand that, because I know that the initial research and science behind it is to say that you need a certain amount of seats between your pool of people who you go with. Well, 4,000 at Old Trafford, you can obviously fit in a hell of a lot more than you can do with 4,000 at Goodison. So I don't understand that. The other side of it is this COVID situation, as we've seen with the second spike, is not linear in the slightest. And when we're getting these sort of breaks from it at Christmas, and we're getting the fans back in football, which is great, I think, for particularly lesser clubs who need the finances. And I'm talking like non-league, lower league clubs who a couple of thousand, few hundred people make the entire difference between them existing and not. Completely understand that side of it. At the elite level in the Premier League, I think it's very different. We live in a different world. I think that is normally one of real wealth. So I just feel it's like a really difficult thing to get my head around when we're not learning the lessons of what we should have from the first outbreak back in March. Everybody went to the Eat Out to Help Out thing and all that stuff. And that sort of general socialising and mixing resulted in a spike that we've seen right now that we're still suffering the consequences from. So therefore, why would you not, as a logical solution, do exactly what Jake said and be far more patient with this? And let's get the nail on the head. We're putting the cart before the horse here. Let's get everything in order so we know that even a worst case scenario, fans going back to football matches won't result in us having to go into a tier 3 lockdown anytime soon after that. I think it's blatantly obvious that that's how this is managed. Now, you have to look at the time scale between when we get vaccines and the rollout with that, which is hopefully coming in the next few weeks to all the way up to spring, say. Surely then that the policy should be, let's take it in sort of incremental stages. So if we're rolling out vaccines to...
Is this not, sorry to interrupt you, Dave, is this initial phase not part of that, the incremental process?
I think it is.
Is this not put on the first, steps down?
I think it is, but I also feel as if that, is it enough to stave off the threat of an even further spike in COVID? That's the balancing act here. It's always been a balancing act, and if I have any sympathy whatsoever with this government, it is that there seems to be an impossible answer. In whatever way you see COVID, whether you think it's a massive hoax and we're all getting microchipped, or whether you think it's a genuine life-threatening disease, I feel as if we need to do the right research to the nth degree. We're lucky the times we live in, the technology we've got at our disposal. Would it really be that difficult for scientists, educated people, to be able to say, well, X amount of people can go to Goodison Park and watch a game and the R rate won't go any higher than 1? And a few thousand more could go to Old Trafford and it'd be exactly the same case. Why is that so difficult? I understand it's time, it's money. When you think of the amount of money that's already been wasted in how the government's tried to deal with COVID so far, the PPE fiasco, now looking at it towards the vaccines, is there going to be enough? How's it going to be rolled out? All of that stuff is setting us back. And I just really hate to be sat there, say, in March, April time, and we've been allowed to go back to games. It's slowly increased in terms of the numbers that are allowed back. And then bang, we can't get a vaccine. It's proven that it has side effects. It has to go back into research and all that. And we have to roll everything back and we go back into a restrictive state that's the great people like Dave Kelly are having to suffer and continue their hard work towards food banks. Like he said, the best thing for him is to be closed down. That's what he wants. He doesn't want a job doing food banks. We don't get that unless we nail this properly. We've had 2 attempts at it now and failed. If we get the vaccine, yeah, game changer. But how does football come back whilst we're still waiting for that to be rolled out? So I'd be more than happy to wait because at the end of the day, that it's a short-term heartache, if you like, for a massively long-term gain. And if you told me that we have to wait until next season, August, to go and watch Everton at Goodison Park again, but it means that we can do that for the rest of our lives, then absolutely choose that rather than a half-assed, a few thousand can come here or there, but there's still a risk of COVID coming back and biting us on the arse.
Without getting too political, because we've got to talk about how Everton have got no subs and a I do feel like football's been politicised in a way that
massively, mate.
it's been almost thrown a bone to the working class people, and I think it was the first time. I think
then exploited, Jake.
Yeah,
then it's been exploited.
Absolutely. I think the first time around when they brought the football back, I think it was a little bit of shut them up with the football, and I think it's happening again. I'm not entirely sure I fully believe that we will be back this season. But I do feel like it has been politicised where they've gone, throw them a bone, shut them up a little bit, and use football and sport as a way of doing that. And I don't buy it. I don't understand it. I don't think it's logical. And I want to get back to seeing Everton, but I completely agree with everything that you've just said, Dave, and let's just draw the line under the season. Certainly for the Premier League.